Today, we are going to talk about SharePoint, compliance, and lawsuits. Have you ever heard of a company being sued over their SharePoint content? SharePoint is often used to manage sensitive or confidential data, and if that data is mishandled or improperly secured, it can result in serious consequences. For example, if a company fails to comply with data protection regulations such as General Data Protection Regulation (GDPR) or Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act (HIPPA), and as a result, sensitive data is exposed or breached, the company may be liable for damages or fines. Similarly, if a company fails to comply with industry-specific regulations, such as those governing financial services or healthcare, and that failure results in harm to customers or patients, the company may be subject to legal action. In addition, compliance failures in SharePoint can also result in legal action by employees, partners, or other stakeholders who are affected by the failure. For example, if an employee's personal information is exposed due to a SharePoint security breach, they may have grounds to sue their employer for damages. To mitigate the risk of legal action related to compliance failures in SharePoint, it is important for companies to ensure that they are following best practices for data management and security, and to implement appropriate controls and safeguards to protect sensitive data. This includes regular audits of SharePoint environments to identify and remediate any compliance issues. Here are some examples of compliance failures related to SharePoint that have resulted in legal action. In 2015, a class action lawsuit was filed against the state of Michigan over its use of SharePoint for managing public records. The lawsuit alleged that the state had failed to comply with state and federal records retention laws, and that records related to the Flint water crisis had been improperly deleted or altered. The case was settled in 2018 for $640,000. In 2017, the U.S. Department of Justice announced a settlement with ClinicalWorks, a healthcare company, over allegations that it had falsified its certification for its EHR software. As part of the settlement, ClinicalWorks was required to provide free upgrades to its customers, including those using SharePoint to manage patient records. In 2019, a lawsuit was filed against a New York City construction company over its use of SharePoint to store confidential employee data. The lawsuit alleged that the company had failed to properly secure the SharePoint site, leading to the exposure of personal information for hundreds of employees. The case is still ongoing. These are just a few examples of compliance failures related to SharePoint that have resulted in legal action. It is important for organizations to ensure that they are using SharePoint in compliance with relevant regulations and best practices. Now let's talk about the ADA. The Americans with Disabilities Act is a federal law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities. The ADA requires that digital content, such as websites and software, be accessible to individuals with disabilities. Failure to comply with the ADA can result in legal action, including lawsuits by employees or the government. In this essay, I will discuss a hypothetical case of a company being sued for their SharePoint failing to comply with ADA. Imagine a large financial services company that uses SharePoint as its primary platform for internal communication and document management. The company has several thousand employees, and many of them use SharePoint on a daily basis to access and share information related to their work. One of the company's employees, let's call her Sarah, has a visual impairment that makes it difficult for her to access information on the company's SharePoint site. Sarah has requested reasonable accommodations, such as screen readers or other assistive technologies, to help her access the information she needs, but the company has failed to provide them. Sarah files a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, alleging that the company has violated her rights under the HIPPA by failing to provide reasonable accommodations. The EEOC investigates the complaint and determines that the company's SharePoint site is not accessible to individuals with visual impairments, in violation of the HIPPA. The EEOC notifies the company that it is in violation of the HIPPA and advises them to take corrective action. The company responds by conducting an accessibility audit of its SharePoint site and discovers that there are many barriers to accessibility, including inaccessible forms, lack of alternative text for images. The company realizes that it has failed to consider accessibility when developing its SharePoint site and that it has not provided reasonable accommodations. The company takes immediate action to correct the accessibility issues on its SharePoint site, including implementing accessibility best practices, providing training to employees on accessibility. The company also provides Sarah with the reasonable accommodations she requested, including a screen reader and other assistive technologies. Despite the company's efforts to correct the accessibility issues on its SharePoint site and provide reasonable accommodations, Sarah files a lawsuit against the company. The company hires a team of lawyers to defend against the lawsuit, but ultimately agrees to settle the case out of court by paying Sarah a substantial sum of money. This hypothetical case illustrates the importance of ensuring that digital content, such as SharePoint sites, is accessible to individuals with disabilities in compliance with the HIPPA. Failure to do so can result in legal action, including lawsuits and costly settlements, and can damage a company's reputation and relationship with its employees. It is essential for companies to consider accessibility from the outset when developing digital content and to provide reasonable accommodations to employees with disabilities to ensure compliance with the HIPPA. Do you have any examples of a company who faced a lawsuit over their SharePoint? If you like this content and you would like to see more of this content, please like and subscribe. And visit our website at sharepointaudit.com for more SharePoint auditing tips. We hope you find this video helpful. In the comments section, give your honest review of this video.